I was listening to you during Founder University, and I thought, man, I really want to talk to you more because just the background that I've been through in Web3 and thinking about governance. And then you started talking about how you were doing it. So I thought this would be super cool just to sort of have a brain jam on this. Oh, if
Yeah.
now is still a good time with you, what I'll do is we'll just run this and I'll do an introduction to myself and you. And then it's pretty casual. I've had I've had Jeffrey Huntley, the creator of the Ralph Loop, on one of my shows. Michael Levin, a biologist, on one of my shows, and just people are building with agents, and it's sort of like the bleeding edge. So I
hmm
like to talk to the people who are at the forward end of that thinking, and you're one of them. So for those that don't know me, I'm Ian Pilon, and I am working on an agent app called Voice Claude, and that's basically I'm enabling business owners, small to medium sized business owners, talk to their business just by installing agents within their network and having an easy way to either text or even call their agents. And then I met Nic through Jason Calacanis, the founder university, and that's how we met. So that's the context. And Nic, you are the founder and CEO of Sanna, building trust infrastructure for agentic AI. I was fortunate enough to hear your pitch on the inside privately to our group, and now I thought I would really like to get you on the show and get visibility into Sanna because I think you're a forward thinker, probably ahead of the curve. And then I imagine everybody's going to start needing what you're doing in the future. Maybe help the audience get to know a little bit more about you, Nic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me, Ian. So yeah, my name is Nic Allen, again, CEO and founder of Sanna. And so agents are moving from generating text to taking actions. They're sending messages. They're starting to touch customer data. They're changing systems. And eventually they're going to start negotiating with other agents. The controls around them right now are still mostly prompts and permission, ANSI, logging, observability, and all that. What Sanna does is it turns governance into an executable boundary. So a company defines a signed version policy, an inline gateway or interceptor. So there's an MCP or a middleware can allow, hold, or block an attempted action. And the decision produces a cryptographic receipt. And the important part for me is the independence. An auditor, counterparty, or a customer can verify that receipt offline with a public key. And so the long-term goal is neutral evidence layer across agent vendors and enforcement systems. So yeah, I can go into more detail,
Yeah.
but I think that's the 45-second answer there, or up to a minute.
Yeah, and Nic, well done, and it is highly technical. So let's just assume that a general layman like me, who is non-technical but vibe coding and building, wants to make sense of that. I did a little bit of homework here, and I just sort of have my sort of general idea about what governance really means. I'll play this back, and then maybe you can tell that story, how it's potentially for people like me to sort of grok it. But if we strip away the jargon, governance is one thing. Proof for someone who wasn't in the room that your agent stayed inside the lines. It answers questions like, can you prove the agent didn't do the thing it wasn't allowed to do? When it screwed up, can you show a stranger exactly what rule it broke and when? And then the key word there is stranger. So that is multiple parties wanting to make sense of some action, whether that's a biological human or a digital one. So is that a good way for me to think about governance, or have you thought about it or described it any other way?
So that's actually a really good way of explaining it. And that kind of takes the concept of governance, because we see governance as being a lot of different things. Like Microsoft has their whole governance suite that they released, and it's like all encompassing. It's really broad, but it's not really very deep. Um, and so I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. But you're pretty much right on with, I think that's I think that's the best way of putting it. That's kind of my version of governance. Other people are using governance to talk about, guardrails. And
Okay.
guardrails are fine, but they don't, provide cryptographic proof and that type of thing. So what I'm taking is, and governance for me is what I'm actually starting to call trust infrastructure. So I think you saw, some of my early pitches or early talking about Sanna and Founder University. I was, talking about AI, agent governance. And I've kind of shifted that because it isn't true just governance. It's trust infrastructure. It's providing the ability to trust not only in what your agent is doing, or not only in what your agent is doing, that it's doing things within the bounds that you set for it, but it's also the trust to be able to, if God forbid something had gone wrong, you can go back and you can prove it and you can show, or let's say that you got sued and absolutely nothing went wrong, but somebody wanted to sue you for your AI use. You can go back and you can say, well, hey, it was governed under this policy. It made this decision for these reasons. This policy was approved by, VP so and so on this date. And that way we're bridging the gap from, vibes effectively and hoping that the AI agent is going to do what it's supposed to do, to actually being able to trust that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing and being able to go back and prove that it did it.
I love it. It's bringing that rigor into the workflow for obviously systems as they scale, where you need to have more, what's the word? Just not security, but just it's kind of like when I think about vibe coding, I can say, well, it's fine if I vibe code an app that has no consequences if something is wrong. So I can vibe. I use it to prototype, and then as I get to production scale, I'm no longer vibe coding, and now I'm building resiliency into the system, and it's a different way that I build. And I think when you're talking about trust or the layer that you're developing, is it only around critical infrastructure, or do you imagine it getting so, I guess, deeper down into just regular consumer applications? Do you see what I mean? Does it start with critical infrastructure where high compliance is needed first, and then it sort of ends up seeping down into everything, or how do you imagine that?
So that's a great question. I see it kind of two ways. One, yeah, I think the critical infrastructure and everything is obviously a good starting point, and that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of companies, and that's where I'm starting to have some conversations where it's important for them to be able to do their work. There's a stat, and I'm not going to try and remember the actual percentage here, because as we know, 87% of statistics are made up on the spot. But what basically I was saying is a large majority of agentic AI deployments and trials and pilots within large organizations are failing. They're stopping them. They're either not doing what they want them to do, or it is doing it, but they don't believe that they can trust it, and they're shutting it down. So that's one area where I think can be really beneficial. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be, critical regulatory infrastructure, as long as
Okay.
it's critical to you. I was talking to another founder who was interested, and we're having some initial conversations about it. But basically, his company, part of what they do is their AI agents go and they take information from customers, and then they give them a quote back on, give them a back on what the customer wants to do and everything. So basically, that's not necessarily critical regulatory infrastructure, but that is an agent negotiating on your behalf. And that's where it
Yes.
becomes critical to you. And so that's kind of the distinction. It
Love
doesn't
it.
necessarily have to be, in healthcare and in finance and, in legal and all these actually government regulated industries. It can be that you need your agent to be able to be trusted. And let's say, your agent agreed to something, and effectively bound by that, depending on what
Yes.
your, agreements are and everything else. But let's just say that you're bound to what your agent negotiated. Oh, would you trust an agent where you gave it guidelines and you said, no, everything that you quote has to be within a percentage, within a percentage, to make sure that we're making our profit? And would you trust that agent more than you would trust an agent that's running off of a government policy that basically states that you have to operate under these criterias, and you cannot quote something if it lands outside of a percentage delta, or some things along those lines? And so where it's not necessarily critical infrastructure, it is critical to you because you're bound by that
Love it.
effectively.
Love it.
And then taking that a step further, let's say that your customer was unhappy with the work, and they want to come after you for whatever reason. Maybe they think the agent quoted too high or something, but it was agreed to. And again, you can go back and you have that proof within Sana Cloud to go, which is our online management control panel. But all of your receipts from all of your agents are stored within Sana Cloud, and you can go back and you can filter all of the actions by that agent on that date. You can filter it down to determine and find the receipts for all of the decisions that agent made over the course of negotiating that contract with the customer. Again, this is kind of it's more further out there. Well, not a lot of companies are doing that, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
starting to become more of the that's really starting to become. And I should rather say that's where I believe companies and enterprises are wanting to go now, because it allows them, if you can set and forget an agent and let it go off and negotiate contracts and set up customers and all these kind of things, then that frees you up to run other parts of your business.
Yep, yep. Well said, Nick. Because it made me think going into this call, I had the mental model that governance was just decision making and that, or sorry, like shared decision making. So me myself as an entity, I just govern myself. I'm self-governed. I can do whatever I want.
Exactly.
Right. And then I go out into the world and all of a sudden I'm in a shared space of social constructs and contracts that say, hey, well, we don't do this and commit crimes or you go to jail. So I love how coming over to your world is letting me see it from a different perspective. And now, especially with building agents. So one of them that I'm building for a client right now is the ability for them to talk to their business intelligence and they just want to know certain information about their data. They're leasing trailers out and they want to know like when was the last safety done on trailer X? And I can't have bad information coming back to this or you lose trust and then the whole system dies because now they're like, well, this thing's garbage. If it's, trust is, I can't lose that. So this is what got me really excited about talking to you because, and also how you just framed it around, it doesn't have to be critical infrastructure because if I lose that moment of trust with this customer I have because it said the wrong data, the safety or whatever, that the whole system is garbage after that, they're not going to trust it. So I've been trying to figure out, well, how do I architect this? And the only way that I've known currently is to try to over engineer the system where agents don't need to be making deterministic decisions.
Hmm.
And then I really wanted to be a part of the system where it's non-critical so far. But I think you're opening me up to seeing using a system like yours might be able to add a layer of rigor that you could almost like deploy maybe a pilot and start to look at it under the hood. Are people doing that at all, or is that a good
Yeah,
idea?
so that's actually what I'm recommending in some of the conversations that I'm having early on with people is so and I kind of glossed over it earlier, but I mentioned that Sauna operates as a real-time middleware and interceptor, but it also operates as an MCP server. And you can drop that MCP server and it basically acts as an MCP proxy. And so any calls that your agent makes that are MCP related, it goes through that proxy and it
Cool.
then prevents it from doing it from reaching outside and accessing any other sources or anything else through MCP that it wasn't allowed and governed to do underneath its policy.
Cool.
And one of the other cool thing, and so kind of my world, my background, I've worked in regulated spaces and and this idea actually came from when I worked at Google on end user protection services when we were closed sourcing reCAPTCHA into reCAPTCHA Enterprise. And effectively, there's like an audit mode. And that's what I've also developed within Sauna. So you can actually run Sauna with an MCP server or in the middleware or whatever, and you can run it and you can find out exactly how your agent is running to get a baseline, and then you can build your rules based on what you see your agent's behavior is. That provides you it gives you a picture, a snapshot of how your agent operates, and then you can customize your rules for that agent based on how you know your agent operates, what you want it to have access to, what you don't want it to have access to. Let's say you saw it reaching out. It was supposed to be finding customer information, but for some reason it reached out to the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know that, and so now we can put a rule in place that prevents it from webseek. And we
Yeah.
prevent it from accessing that MCP, or if we were putting it into the CLI or into the middleware, you prevent it from accessing those CLI tools. And that's kind of the neat thing is that you can run it in an audit or a pass through mode and see everything that it's doing. It logs everything, and then you can build your policy based around that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I was prepping for this call so that I'm at the Builders Club here, so not in my home office, but in my home office, I have a Hermes agent that I'm trying to develop well, not new. I'm not using the out of the gate memory architecture with Hermes.
Hmm.
I'm trying to construct my own after the podcast I did with Michael Levin and realizing that memory is construction, not storage in the sense of, how do you deal with, things that are going to grow in complexity or size as systems scale. So I think this will lead to a question I have for you, which is like, I don't want my memory to remember everything that is not relevant. I want it to prune like humans prune and naturally just keep helping me achieve my goals based on a sea of memories, but I don't need specificity on every single memory I've ever had.
Hmm.
Now, for you in the system that you're developing, governance obviously is going to have memory architecture components to that system. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, how do you manage that part where if a system scales that this is just going to be a lot of data storage, or how can I think about it?
Yeah. So from Sana's perspective, Sana really doesn't care about the model. It doesn't care about the memories that the model has, the instructions that the model has. Really, all it cares about is whether or not the actions that it's taking are um, are allowed within the policy. So
Okay.
I kind of take all of that out of the mix. Now, one of the cool things that I am working on right now, though, is the concept, and it started off actually with a conversation that I was having with another founder and Lucas in Founder University.
Lucas
We
is
were talking.
cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I love Lucas.
Lucas is cool. Yeah.
He's absolutely great. Had some really great conversations with him. But, I kind of had the kernel of an idea while we were talking and I kind of was working through it. And basically what it is it's upstream governance. And it's basically proving that not only did your agent operate within its bounds, but we can also, and this isn't implemented yet, it's still one of those things that I'm working on. But basically what you can do is you can govern what memories or what information it even has access to in order to make its decisions. And I
Interesting.
kind of mentioned that a little bit with the what's it called, the web fetch or whatever. But
Yeah.
we can actually take it a step further, and let's say that you have your customer database or whatever, your repository, and you can actually tell it that for all customer information, any customer queries, it has to go through, we can only pull information from this source. You can't pull information from your memory or your preloaded context or anything else.
Or
And
the
it
internet.
basically forces, or the internet or anywhere else, it forces it doesn't make an LLM deterministic, because that's kind
Oh,
of in conflict with each other, but
yeah,
it
yeah,
takes it down to a deterministic path that we can actually gate and bring a more repeatable result back to
yeah,
things. And that's
yeah.
kind of the cool stuff. These are the things that as I'm building that I didn't think about when I first started working on Sana. Sana in its initial inception was more of a receipt generating tool that operated off of Langfuse. And so that was the very first version of Sana back at the end of December of 2025 when I was first starting to play with it. And I built this and I was like, okay, this is really cool. And I said, well, what can I do with it? And the answer was, well, I've basically built some fancy auditing. And so I said, okay, because proof without governance is fancy receipts. Governance without proof is, okay, well, we're governing it, but I can't prove that I actually governed anything. So I realized that I needed to marry the two together. But again, when I was first thinking about this, I wasn't even thinking about that portion of things. I was just trying to prove that I could make an LLM, work within bounds, and prove that that its response adhered to certain criteria. And then moving forward, I realized, oh, well, we can actually implement governance. And that was kind of the first unlock. And now I'm realizing that I can unlock, agentic to agentic conversations and communications and negotiations by, that's that same concept that I mentioned, that conversation with Lucas and the other founder, is that it's what I'm calling a governance envelope. And I actually have this white paper on sana.dev, but it basically defines what the all of the corpus, the information, all the rules and everything else that the agent used to make the decisions that it made, and it can pass that on to another agent. That agent can digest that, and there it is, the governance envelopes for verifiable agent handoff. I actually have another version of that I'm working on right now that's going to
Amazing.
come
Can't wait to
out.
read it.
Yeah, it was really interesting. But I have a second part of that that's coming out, which actually extends this to cross organizational trust, and that's where I really think agentic AI is really going. Is it's unlocking these cool things like your product. I couldn't come up with that word. Your product. I was really impressed with it. So I was in the room at Launchfest in San Francisco
Oh, you were
when you
there.
demoed
Okay.
that. I was there, and I was sitting
Awesome.
back there. I was actually working on some Sauna stuff while I was watching your pitch, and I was like I was just typing on my laptop, and then you started talking. I was like, oh wait, that's really cool, and I was there. It is right there. Um, and so like your pitch, really, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And it actually got me thinking about the bounds of what agents can do. And that's where I started thinking about, the agent to agent communications, and not just within your organization, because organizations are going to have a lot of different agents. Your marketing team in the future, and this is again how I see things, but your marketing team is going to be running an agent, and that agent may be running on Claude infrastructure because that's what they're familiar with. But your devs that somehow, or maybe not your devs, but another team is running with agents, and that agent's running on OpenAI, and it's using OpenAI infrastructure. So that's all great. Well, and I love Claude. I've done most of my development with Claude and a little bit in Codex, but that agent, that agent can't really talk to, or there's no shared infrastructure between a
Yes,
Claude agent and
they're
an
not
OpenAI
interoperable.
agent. Exactly. And
Yes.
so that was where I first started thinking, okay, where are agents really going to go? And they're going to need to talk to each other. They're going to need to negotiate things. They're going to need to, I foresee a future, and I know you've talked about this. It's payments, and if you look at, I think it was Forrester or Gartner, one of those actually had their prediction is, I think it's by 2032, to have a multi-trillion-dollar agentic economy. And what do we have really for? What do we really have to prove things, or
Nothing.
to prove that your agent was doing things? So basically, what I'm seeing is that shift. It's not the transition from a chatbot to a smarter chatbot. It's suggestion to side effect. So an agent that drafts an email is a productivity tool, and I use that all the time.
Yeah.
It's a force multiplier for me. But an agent that sends it, changes the CRM, books the job, quotes a price, and initiates a payment, that agent has exercised authority. And that's where the difference is. And that's where we see that governance gap. So we'll go
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the governance, though I'm calling it trust, because most current controls are some mixture of instructions and prompt engineering and guardrails, IAM scopes, and shared credentials, model provider safety filters, post hoc logging, and then human policies and documents. All of those are useful and they're great, and everybody should have them, but none of them answers, was this action evaluated under an approved policy at the moment it crossed into the real
Wow.
world? And
Yeah.
that's where Sana really comes in. We defined a signed version policy, what I call a
Yeah.
Sana constitution, and I blatantly stole that concept from Anthropic, because I really liked it and it fit with what I was building. You put governance on an instrumented action boundary like an MCP gateway or the runtime interceptor that we've got. You
Yes.
evaluate that action, allow, hold, or escalator block, and then produce a signed governance receipt that binds that action and the decision to the policy. And that way it's a triple bound receipt there. It has three different portions of it. Any number of them, if that's missing, it does, it's not a valid receipt. And that's what I believe is going to unlock this agentic.
Wow. And you're right at the heart of it. That's incredible how forward thinking you are. So pre agent era, you were at Google. Have you always been able to sort of see ahead of the curve before, or see the wave before it came? Because you're right on. You're still ahead of time, in my opinion. Like, because it's still coming when we'll have agent to agent communication and payments.
Mhm.
It's still so new, but have you always been super early?
So I don't know about always, but I love technology. I'm a giant nerd. I've been doing this for 26 years now.
Okay.
I started in help desk when I was 17. So there you can, those people can do the math. In my early to mid 40s. But I started when I was 17 working help desk at a medical clinic.
Okay.
And I was one of the ones who was pushing for us to go get an EHR, and we actually did get an EHR because I saw that as being the future there. I was actually pushed. Another company that I worked at, they relocated me to Texas. And so I pushed to be able to work from home in like the mid 2000s. I said, we have the technology, we have voice over IP phones, we've got, these little sonic wall firewalls. Why do I need to be in an office? My boss goes, oh, you don't. Your office is your house now. So that one worked out well in my favor because it eliminated the commute to the different places in San
Yeah.
Antonio. But so I wouldn't say I've always been forward thinking, but I'm always reading and I'm always learning. I'm always looking for what that next thing is going to be. My timing with this actually happened to coincide pretty remarkably with the rise of agentic AI, with OpenClaw, all of those things. And we don't
Yeah.
hear much about OpenClaw, though I've been working a lot with Codex since 5.6
Okay.
Soul came out.
Yes.
And I don't know this for certain, and somebody can go look it up, or I can go look it up afterwards. But I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of OpenClaw in the new versions of Codex and the Chat GPT app. That's just my personal opinion. But I kind of do see some of these things coming, and I'm always looking for ways to automate and ways to make things. Trying to think of the best way of putting that, but I'm always looking for how to do things better than I've been doing them before. I was an early
Yeah,
adopter of AI stuff and LLMs and working with that. I was working on ChatGPT like 3 years ago when it was first starting to come out, and it was generating absolute nonsense. But I used it as a force multiplier
me too.
to write some like PowerShell scripts and things like that for the
Yeah,
company that I
yeah.
was working for at the time. One of the interesting things though was right before I started working on Sana, I spent a little over a year as the incoming CTO of an not established, but a company as a startup doing cybersecurity for email and phone security. And unfortunately, we didn't work out that well. Didn't really find our product market fit. And I came in kind of a year into it when they had tested things and they weren't working. But one of the things that I was pushing for that I thought we should be looking into was the concept of using AI agents for email spam and phishing detection. And CEO wasn't really in agreement with me on at the time. I kind of specced it out and everything, and then wouldn't you know, about 6 months later, we. I'm looking at LinkedIn and I see this brand shiny new company startup, and it's it's doing agentic AI, anti-phishing protection, and business email compromise protection. And it happens to be the CEO happens to be the guy that I worked for, who was the product manager and the product lead for Recapture Enterprise at Google.
Wow.
And the CEO of the company that I was at, he and I both worked at Google at the same time. And I pinged him on I think we were using Wicker, and I said, "Hey man, you see Sai's new company?" And he goes, "No," and he goes, "Oh, so they're doing what you said that we should be doing." And I said, "Yeah," and I think that ship has sailed at this point. So we did some more shifting and things, but that was one area where I saw the writing on the wall and I knew it was going to be coming. And now, the other players in that space are all doing the same thing. Proofpoint is working on agentic stuff. Mimecast is working on agentic stuff. But, size company came out of nowhere with, a $17 million seed raise.
Well, there's so
And
much money flying at this from
there
every
really
angle,
is.
right? Do you think that's
There
cooling off
really
right
is.
now? I think it's kind of cooling down now.
It is. So you look at like I mentioned OpenClaw, and everybody, everything was OpenClaw and agents
Yeah,
this and agents that and everything, and that really cooled off. And you even see that watching, Jason watching This Week in Startups. He's not really talking about OpenClaw and that type of stuff as much. I think he's moved on to Perplexity Computer, but I don't think AI itself is cooling off. I think what's cooling off is people strapping AI to everything. I was looking at it was an IPO for, gosh, I can't remember who it was now. That's going to bug me, but it was a non-technology company. It was a non-AI company, traditional whatever it was. And you go and you starting to dig through their filings and everything, and they have a section for AI. Oh, it was I think it was a sandwich company. It was like Jersey Mike's
yeah, 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 yeah.
and I think it was Jersey Mike's. But they had a section in their IPO filing about AI use. And I go, okay, is this jumping the shark, or is AI really just that mainstream now? So we have to mention AI in basically any filing, or it
Just
looks like
have to
we're
say it.
falling behind the curve. I think some of the money is dying off because a lot of the money that was flowing in were for wrappers. It was
Yes, yes.
for, companies that, their ideas were great at the time and they raised a lot of money. But what are they doing now when, Anthropic and OpenAI
Exactly.
are dropping features within their product
Yeah.
that features within their products that effectively, does everything that this entire company has built around. And that's one of the things with Sana. Sure, Anthropic could go and they could build a receipt suite, and Microsoft could go and they could build a receipt suite, and OpenAI could build a receipt suite. But the thing is, now you're, especially with OpenAI and with Anthropic, at that point now you've got a situation where the fox, you're trusting the fox,
Yeah,
fox with
in
the
the
hen house.
henhouse. Yeah.
where you're trusting them to prove that their own agent was governed when it made this decision. Well,
Yeah.
that's a built-in conflict of interest, and that's one of
Yes,
the
you got
things
it.
that
I love it.
I where I believe in the independence and everything, and that's actually why Sana, the SDKs themselves are all open source, because I believe that people should know how it works, because governance shouldn't be a black box. And so if we're trusting this to be able to govern AI agents and to run, potentially payment infrastructure and these things in the future, we have to know how it works, and it can't be a black box.
You
That's
got
kind
it.
of
You got it.
my side point there.
Well, and I think that's why you're going to hit the timing on this as the market starts to cool and everybody sees what wrappers are and goes, okay, well, if Anthropic, OpenAI, and whoever else are the major enterprise players, do they come down to the lower tiers, or do they sort of like just go own critical infrastructure and let the market play out for the middle ground and stuff? That I think you're just sort of like right on time, where the sense that I get when I talk to the general layman and other people that aren't sort of like so consumed by it as us, because we're just in the weeds,
Yeah.
they all are concerned about the same thing, right? It's like, yeah, well, when I chat to it, sometimes it's totally making something up, and then it says, "Oh yeah, you're absolutely right." Everybody knows this now, right? So, and I mean everybody. So anybody who's ever opened ChatGPT has this mental model that these things can make shit up, and then just go, "Oh yeah, you're right." And then what I've been trying to do is argue that, okay, well, agents are allowing us to bridge away from that. Is it sycophantic behavior or
Yes.
hallucination? It's like
So
it's an
it's a
engineering
combination of
problem.
the two. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think hype cycle comes down, and then when we get serious business players, or like my customer that I'm working with right now, I have to have an intelligent answer when I say, this doesn't work like ChatGPT because, right? And then I say and I show, either architecture that says why it's going to come back with a specific answer, not to the granularity where you're at, which is why I'm so excited about what you're working on and why I had to have you on this show. It's super cool. Now, Nick, is it just you working on this still, or do you got a team?
It is just me, primarily full time. I have a couple of advisors that I'm working with. I'm really talented UI UX customer experience designer that I actually owe. Now I'm realizing I owe her an email. I've been down in the weeds and building for the last couple of weeks, and I need to
I
send
know
her an
how it
email.
is, Nick. I know how it is, man. I
Yeah.
missed I missed two meetings already this week. I'm just like,
Oh no.
because I was doing a customer on site and I wasn't looking at my calendar, because now I'm like bouncing in and out of the office. I'm like, if I don't have my calendar right beside me, man, it's
Oh,
slipping.
absolutely. That's one of the things I say. If it doesn't go into my calendar, it doesn't exist. And these days, I can get a notification and then just completely ignore it for whatever reason. And then I also have another advisor, Amy, who's been really great. I can actually name her by name, but she's big in healthcare. She had has a really good grasp on not just AI in this space. She's been primarily in healthcare and has been really deeply embedded with AI in healthcare. So that's why I brought her on board initially. But she's actually provided a lot of great insights on just customer mindset, not just in healthcare, but across a variety of different industries. So those are the two people that I'm primarily working on. I am looking to bring on a founding level engineer to kind of take some of the engineering pressure off of me, so I can then be focused on, having conversations like this with you and with investors and especially with customers. So that's what I'm looking to bring on here in the near future.
Brilliant. So let's pull on the customer thread then. Who do you imagine is your ideal customer right now? Or maybe you already have them lined up, but if you could, maybe this reaches people who know somebody who knows somebody. Who is your ideal customer that you'd like to talk to first?
So right now, I think so there's kind of two different prongs that I've been going at here, but my true ideal customer is a customer in a regulated industry that is running an AI pilot, running an AI program, wants to deploy, but doesn't believe that they can trust the AI agent's actions.
Yeah.
Primarily in healthcare or in finance or in one of those industries early. Interestingly, in this one, I think you saw some of the pitches that were oriented on this. is insurance. Interesting, and I did not realize this until I started just doing, again, digging down and doing research. There are liability insurance companies that are no longer covering businesses for AI, or they're requiring specific AI insurance policies. As
Yeah.
part of that, they're also, some of them are even forcing them to have proof of governance in some way, shape, or form beyond
Look,
just we have this PDF policy. And so those are kind of the two my two ideal customers. This second are again that regulated industry case, or the case where you need to be able to prove that your AI agent was operating under a policy, that it was governed in order to be able to get insurance to be able to do your job. So those are
yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
the two main ones, and I think it expands from there.
Brilliant, because it makes me think of explainability as a high value thing here, like not only running a pilot and so there's like us wanting to trust the system, and then there's like some stakeholder in a multi-million dollar project who needs to explain to other stakeholders that this thing is legit and it's ready to push out and push further. So I think that is another keyword that's super valuable for what Sonic can do. Is if I was working on a high stakes project, multi-million dollars, I want to know inside and out, even through running my internal testing and my pilot projects, how all of this stuff is, if there's traceability and visibility behind why the agent went this way or that way. And also, I thought about this earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm starting to notice this more when I'm playing with different agents, right? So on my Hermes agent, I've tried different open source models because I'm trying to inevitably get to open source, clean, like have my own LLMs at home. But there's not a lot you can do with these things on a 16 gigabyte Mac Mini. But nonetheless, I'm like, well, I wonder
No.
how far I could push it. So, but in doing so, then you can see where there's drift or these
Mhm.
agents go off the rails. And for people out there who may not know what that means, is kind of like, so when you're using ChatGPT or the big houses like Claude, these are really, really, really gigantic models. And so their behavior can be tightened. While they're tight, they're reliable. They don't do weird things as often as a small one does. So I'm discovering that more and more. And I'm trying to go, okay, well, this agent just will not stay on the rails. So, and I started seeing that as evidence that they will tell you, hey, in a chat that everything's working, and you clearly catch it lying.
Yeah.
So it brings to surface why your system is going to be so valuable. Don't even know where I was going to go with that. Oh, but the one question here I want to get back to before I also lose this one is, your site says the developer is liable for what agents do, not the model provider, not the developer. So walk us through that. If my agent approves a bad loan, who actually gets sued? It's kind of
You
one of the
do.
questions I had. Yeah. Okay.
And if you look at and that, so in the United States, that's where I'm at. I think you're in Canada,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we'll use my context, and then I can expand out from there.
Where are you in the States, Nick?
So I'm in Central California.
Okay. Okay.
So not in the nice areas with beaches and stuff. I'm in the area with cows and agriculture, and it's supposed to be 102 today. So I'm
Yeah.
not looking
Okay.
forward to that. But so what it comes down to, and you look at the executive order, and I'm not going to pretend to know which one it was, but there was an executive order that the current administration signed into place about AI, and it basically shifted all of the liability for AI implementation downstream to the entity that deployed it. So if you are using an AI agent to approve loans, you're liable. Even if you're buying an off-the-shelf product, you paid for this, you are still liable because
The
you are the one that is using it.
the customer deploying it, not the developer who's
Correct.
built the system. Wow.
Yeah, and
Right.
I
Right.
need to change some of that wording on the website, but to make
Because
that
I
more
thought it was
clear.
me, Nick. I'm like, okay, well, I'm the
Oh,
developer, so I'm going to get
so
burned.
in your case, no. It's basically, and this was actually an interesting conversation that I was having with other founders
Yeah.
at Launch Festival earlier this year, because a lot of them, they thought that they were responsible for it and weren't sure how they were going to handle that. And I said, well, it's actually on the customer. And they go, oh,
Wow.
that actually might be worse in some instances for some
Yeah.
of the use cases
Yeah.
that some of these people were building. But as of right now, yeah, that liability falls all the way downstream to the actual entity that is deploying the agent. And we're seeing that, I mentioned that executive order, but the EU AI Act, to my knowledge, and it may have changed because I haven't looked at it in a couple of weeks here, But to my own knowledge, it's still going into effect just in a couple of weeks here in August. And that can fine entities up to like 3% of your global revenues. If your AI agent, I'm not going to use the exact precise language, but if your AI agent causes harm and you're liable for it, you can be fined by the EU for those things if you're doing business within the EU. And we're going to start seeing that. There's some other legislation in, I believe it's Vietnam has a similar legislation. There's more and more that are popping up. And a lot of people, even the companies that are deploying this, and especially or that are developing these things and developing products, but also the customers that are wanting to use this aren't really aware of all of the liability and everything of liability and the bureaucracy and everything else that's going into place. One of the things that I've mentioned in the past is I believe AI, and especially agentic AI, is coming toward a SOC 2 moment,
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
everybody's going to realize I need governance, or I need trust infrastructure. I need to prove these things. And it's going to come really quickly. The first time we see an AI agent lose a bunch of money
Yep.
or cause a lot of harm,
Yep.
all of these governments are going to be tightening down. And if you don't have anything in place at that point, you're going to be scrambling to
Yeah,
get
because
ahead
you're
of
going to be sitting on this liability and risk that you didn't even know you had, and then bang, it's like,
exactly.
okay, very cool. How are we doing for time? We got about 10 minutes.
I'm good for as long as we want to keep having the conversation. I
All
clear
right,
my
cool,
mornings.
cool, cool. Well, and I think so. So this has been super fluid and fun, but maybe, and we brought it down to general layman's level. But maybe for the technical person out there, walk us through and maybe so then other people in the audience can get some content out of it. Maybe walk us through the governance loop, a constitution, agent, receipt. What happens in the milliseconds between an agent deciding to call a tool and that action reaching a downstream system?
Yeah, absolutely. So where everything starts is the Sana Constitution. It's a YAML file that basically just defines everything that it defines the agent's actions. It's guidelines, what it's supposed to be doing, what it has access to, what it needs to escalate
Is that
for, and all of
predefined?
this.
Sorry to interrupt, Nick. Is the
So
Constitution predefined, or do you define it with the person?
So the entity using Zana, the customer in this case, they define it. Now I can work,
Okay,
especially for early customers, I can work with you to get these constitutions defined. Again, part of it is going to be, deploying that. I think the MCP server is the easiest way to just kind of get an idea and get that baseline, and then we can
gotcha.
work on customizing that constitution. That constitution is a versioned document. So within Sauna Cloud, what you do is you create your constitution, and from there you and I would demo it, but I actually turned my AWS stuff off to
Oh,
do
that's fine.
some changes. Or I didn't turn it off, but I broke a whole lot of things, and I haven't fixed them yet. Since I don't have active customers using it, I figured I can break it, and
You
there were some
can.
things I
You
needed to
can.
tear down, so I went ahead and did that, and that's what I've been heads down working on the last couple of weeks. But again, that document is what defines what that agent is and isn't allowed to do. And again, it's versioned, so it has to be approved. So I have a full, for like enterprise customers and professional customers, corporations. I have a full RBAC in there, so different defined role based access control for those acronym phobic. Or there's a lot of people who aren't in that part of IT. But basically, it's what it basically sets up, individual users get assigned to a profile or a role type, and that role has certain things that it is and that it isn't allowed to do. So, for example, in most instances, and you can override it, an admin or the person who wrote a constitution can't be the same person that approved the constitution. Things like that. So that way you can go back and then you can override it if you're a sole proprietor and you go, yes, I'm the only one who can approve this policy. Then you can approve it. But or if you're a small shop or whatever. But for large enterprises, that's an important thing, because and that was one of the things I learned. I worked for about a year in regulated pharma. And I was a product owner for a couple of GXP regulated products that we ran internally. So this is kind of some of the things that I learned on that side. But basically, that policy, it then becomes the document that proves that it was that YAML file, that constitution. Once it's approved, that is your living doc. You're not your living document. It's your document. It's your policy document. That's what I was looking
Gotcha.
for.
Gotcha.
And the cool thing about that is you can actually version that. So you can, let's say we discovered there were a couple of things that we needed to change. We can go in, we downgrade that policy, we use a new policy based on that one. We make those changes, we save, we approve that policy.
Cool.
That new policy gets distributed to the agent, and then the old one doesn't ever go away though. And that's the important thing because you need to
Yeah.
have, again, it's that
Yeah.
proof. So you can prove that it was governed, and you can prove that it was governed under this policy with these rules that were attached
Love
to
it.
it. And
Yeah.
so kind of to step back and go through that, the governance loop. But
Yeah.
basically starts, so now that I've defined the Constitution, let's say that you've deployed Sana. That governance loop starts when the agent proposes an action. So Sana intercepts that action before it reaches the outside system. It evaluates it against the signed Constitution, determines is the agent allowed to do it? Is it prohibited or does it need approval? If that surface has enough reasoning context, we can
Mhm.
also apply checks. This is kind of, I've not downgraded them, but I haven't prioritized talking about these, but I want to step back because I think this is actually important. So I mentioned the first version of Sana was like reasoning integrity. I called them reasoning
Mhm.
receipts. These are C1 through C5 checks, and they're deterministic checks that apply to an agent's proposed output as part of governing what it's allowed to do. So the things that this checks for are whether the agent contradicts the trusted context. It catches whether an inference is being presented as fact. It looks for certainty that the evidence doesn't justify. Checks whether the agent has silently erased a genuine conflict or attention, and catches cases where it's compressed the context so aggressively that the important conditions have disappeared. Those checks feed into enforcement and not just like observability. So you can actually halt if any one of those deterministic checks fail. So that, again, that contradiction can halt the action, while other failures, and you can set this, other failures might just warn it, it might require review or halt it depending on what your
Very
policy is,
cool.
what your constitution is.
Very, very cool.
So then to go back to the workflow, again, if we have enough reason and context, we apply those C1 through C5 checks to the proposed output. That produces an enforcement decision that allow, warn, or escalate or halt. And only an authorized action crosses that boundary. So if it's not authorized, it can never cross that boundary and actually take that action. Once it's crossed the boundary, either an allow or it makes the decision to proceed, that generates the signed receipt that shows what was attempted, what rules applied, and what decision was enforced. And it's not just if it was successful and allowed to proceed. We generate a receipt if it blocks it too. If it says you weren't allowed to do this, these are all the reasons why, and that allows you to go back in time and find out how often are your agents, trying to do things that are outside
Going
of the
off the
boundaries, and you have a much better idea of how accurate your agents are. Maybe that means we need to strengthen our constitution, or maybe that means we need to change what things that it has access to, or maybe it's always trying to go to the internet for some reason. And that gives, more visibility beyond just the observability tools because you know exactly why it wasn't allowed to do these things. So again, once we generate that receipt, again, it shows what was attempted, what rules applied, what the decision was. Those receipts can then be independently verified and analyzed, which then helps your organization improve your policies. As I was saying, it's kind of a continuous feedback loop. So it's not just observing the agent after the fact, it's governing the action before execution and then creating evidence that the governance actually did occur.
Absolutely brilliant. Okay, cool. You went open source and vendor neutral for trust infrastructure specifically. Was that a value call or a strategic one? Would anyone trust a closed source trust layer?
So it was a little bit of both. Part of it is values because, as I mentioned earlier, this is such an important thing that I don't believe it should be closed loop. I believe there should be visibility into it. Part of it was a strategic decision because if I can define the standard, a Asana receipt, anybody can use a Asana receipt, and that just perpetuates the integration of Sana receipts into people's workflows. The other part of it is you don't have to use Sana Cloud to use Sana. And that was really important to me as well. I believe that, if for whatever reason you don't think you need those cloud receipts, you can store everything locally. When you run it without Sana Cloud, it stores everything locally into a little SQLite sequence or segment. But if you don't believe, but you want to have governance, I don't think governance should be paywalled. I believe that you should be able to do these things. And if it's providing value to you and it's further perpetuating. So let's say a developer was working on a side project and they couldn't afford, the Sauna Cloud licensing or whatever, but they wanted to use it and they wanted to generate the receipts and they wanted to have that proof of governance. I think that that's important. Now, let's say I wanted to be able to allow that. Let's say that developer then goes on and that's their side project. Well, now the company that they're working for is implementing AI and they've been tasked with developing this AI agent or scoping it out or whatever the case may be. Well, they have experience working with Sauna. They were able to use that for free. Now they can take advantage of all the not improvements, but all of the additional features that are provided within Sauna Cloud. So it was partially values because I don't think that governance should be paywalled, but it was also strategic in that I wanted to be able to open it up so that everybody who wanted to use it could, to make it easier to adopt.
Amazing, amazing, Nic. And happy to share this after. I can't wait to share this. This is such a good conversation. And in closing out, 2 years out, is agent governance a checkbox feature every platform has, a regulated requirement like SOC 2, or still something only the burned companies buy?
2 years from now, it's regulated. It's like SOC 2. So I've had a lot of conversations with auditors, as part of, doing my own SOC 2 diligence, so talking to them and finding out what they're seeing out in the real world. And based on that, and then I've got a partnership we're in the process of signing with auditing IT, cybersecurity, and AI governance auditing agency. And so throughout all those conversations, where it seems to be coalescing, and again, this is to my brain, but where it seems to be coalescing is that, it becomes a check mark, governance or trust infrastructure. It becomes table stakes the way that SOC 2 has today. The reason I believe that is because I believe in the agentic economy, and I believe that we're going to see and cross organization AI agents that are working together. I see, not to go too far into the weeds here, but there's use cases for shipping companies, for people that are shipping, for a shipper, that's shipping internationally, to be able to, go through and negotiate that shipping rate with a shipper's, there's no reason why that needs to be done by people. And we're going to see, as we move towards more automation and using AI agents to be able to do this, I think that's where trust infrastructure like Sauna is going to become table stakes, because there's no other way that you can trust your AI agent to do what you want it to be doing, especially when there's legal and contractual and monetary stakes, at
100%.
play. You have to be able to trust your agent and to be able to prove it after the fact to somebody
Yeah.
that wasn't in the room.
Yeah. 100%. Such a great conversation, Nic. Anything else that you think we missed that you'd like to share?
I'm sure there were plenty of things. Like I told you a couple weeks ago when we were setting this up, I could talk about this all day. I'm sure my friends and family will be grateful that, they get at least one day off, since I got to nerd out with somebody else. But no, that's just for right now. Trying to solidify a funding round. I'm hoping for some good news on that this week. And then, again, looking for some people to join the team as, we get funding. But, that's kind of where I'm sitting with things right now. I think we
Amazing.
covered pretty much everything that Sauna does. Looking forward to, any potential conversations that come out of this.
All right, cool. And that's one of the goals that I have by doing this. Not only do I get to learn by osmosis, I'm getting to learn even faster because I'm just being around more people that are at the very cutting edge of where the future is going, and you're working on it now. So you're creating that future. And I'm so grateful to have had the time to speak with you for an hour and learn all about governance. So how can people find you? I found you on LinkedIn. You don't have an X profile. Is it just LinkedIn?
So I've got LinkedIn. I do have a Sauna X account. I think it's Sauna_AI.
Okay.
I'm working on doing socials, but I believe the LinkedIn is linked. I won't even try and find the link. I do have the company LinkedIn. You can search for Sauna. There's a couple of Swedish companies because it is a Swedish word. Basically, the root of it is truth, and that's kind of what I was going for with
Okay.
when I was building this. I thought it was an appropriate name.
Love it.
But you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search for me. Love to connect with other people that are building in the space or want to learn more or anything else. Just love to have these conversations. And I can
Amazing.
I can send you the actual X link when we get off. I'll send
Yeah,
you
and
a
then
LinkedIn message.
very cool. Thanks, Nic. And then I'll add that to the show notes below. So thank you, Nic. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day, man.
Thank you. You do the same. Really
All right.
appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.